Hey guys.
Hello. How's it going? I'm Brandon Rittiman.
I'm Becca Habegger. Happy 4th of July. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, what better day than July 4th to be talking about the money that your politicians take?
Yay!
That's what we're here for.
Yep, absolutely. Brandon, you've been working on an investigation into PG&E firepower money for, well, you've been looking into this for more than a year now, but this, like you said, really sparked, if you will, after you were in Paradise for the Campfire and people started asking some really serious questions to you, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm just posting this on my Facebook page.
Likewise,
so some folks can come chat with us.
Live.
Yeah, so this all culminated in a basically 8-month investigation out of the campfire. We, as the enterprise team here at ABC 10, have been looking into Wildfire since I got here, which is almost a year ago to the day.
Yes.
We've been working on, we did an 8 or 9 episode series last year. It published the day of the campfire, and that included episodes about the 2017 fires in wine country, episodes about the forest management problems that the state has and how those play in with climate change. Because one of the things that's deeply frustrating after looking into this full time for a year is we have politicians out there that are making this about climate change versus forest management, and one likes to focus on one. You know, President Trump loves to focus on forest management and say California is not doing everything it needs to. Half of the acres that need the work are on federal land, first of all, is the issue. And then on the other hand, you've got Gavin Newsom, who's out there talking about climate change, and so was Jerry Brown before. And there's nothing wrong with talking about climate change, but you cannot ignore the forest management piece. We have 150 years of overgrowth in our forests, and there is fuel sitting there waiting to burn. And unless we do something about it, the fire part of this firepower money elemental problem that we're exploring, you're not going to get out of the pickle. So, so there's that whole piece of it.
Yeah.
The reason things have kind of blown up this week is we've been asking your politicians about PG&E, and there's a reason for that. As a paid skeptic, when I had these lawyers suing PG&E going, hey, you know, they're really awful and they're really bad and you need to say how bad they are, I'm like, I'm skeptical of that kind of stuff because I know we've got lawyers out there whose job it is to wake up in the morning, you know, put on their pants and go sue PG&E for a living. That's what they do. There's a small cottage industry of that. But then I quickly learned that PG&E is a federal felon on probation. They committed 6 federal felonies. They were found guilty by a jury of our peers in 2016. August was when they were convicted of 6 felonies. It was 5 counts of willfully breaking federal gas pipeline safety laws. So not just whoopsie. This is like we built our policies here at PG&E in such a way that it is not compatible with the law.
And this is tied to the 2010 San Bruno pipeline explosion.
Exactly. Yeah. 8 people died in the explosion, and PG&E was not charged with any version of homicide for their deaths. And that's one of the things that could be very different for PG&E out of the campfire. And we know that because the DA up in Butte County, Mike Ramsey, told me so, that he is thinking about trying to charge PG&E with 85 counts of manslaughter for all 85 people killed in that fire, as well as potentially 10,000 or more counts of a version of arson if criminal negligence can be proved. And that's the key. They've got to prove in court to a jury that PG&E's policies or actions were such that they amounted to criminal negligence in order to get to that level. And that's why they're digging through terabytes of data right now, financial records from PG&E, trying to figure out what's going on there. So with all of that backstory,
Good context, then learned, important context.
Yeah, that after that conviction, PG&E spent $4.4 million of its company money on politics in California.
After its conviction.
So grab your pint glass, which I hope has some beer in it and not water like mine does. And we can answer your questions about that. But yes, they spent $4.4 million on California politics trying to influence the direction of the laws of our state.
And before we go further, let's talk about the why here, why this is important. Because if you are like a lot of people, you saw Brandon confront Governor Gavin Newsom earlier this week, asking him about money he received in his campaign.
$208,400, not that I have it memorized.
From PG&E.
Well, that was his campaign and a PAC to benefit him. The campaign maximum was $58,000, and then $150,000 went to friends of Gavin Newsom, essentially.
And so that's important both on the governor's level and also the state lawmakers, the state senators and representatives, because why?
Well, it's almost a bigger deal, the legislature. And so the legislature got more than $500,000, okay? And it's 8 out of 10 sitting state lawmakers. So like, we're talking well beyond the supermajority you need to override a gubernatorial veto.
People on both sides of the aisle.
Correct.
Yeah.
And both state parties got more than $500,000 apiece in this time frame that we're talking about. Again, after PG&E is convicted of federal felonies, right? And we've asked both of them. Neither of them have responded to our questions about whether it was right to take that money and whether they're going to give it back. We did ask all 98 state lawmakers who got PG&E money. 2 of them told us they gave back money before we came asking, but one only gave back part of it, which is kind of interesting. Steve Glazer, Democrat from Orinda, he's in the Senate. He gave back $1,500, but the problem is PG&E cut him a check for $1,500, but they also paid a $2,200 bill for his fundraising expenses for his campaign. He didn't give that back. Sure. And he didn't answer our questions either about whether it was right to take that money in the first place. They started responding to us.
And I want to pause there because I think that's an important point to make, and we'll probably keep making it throughout this Facebook Live because the context is so key. As you've pointed out in your web stories and we've pointed out here on Facebook Live and TV, it is not illegal to accept campaign money from a convicted felon, whether a person or a company. Not illegal, but you're asking whether it is ethical.
Right.
Yes.
Is it right?
Morally
correct.
That's
basically our question. Was it okay? I mean, that's how I put it to Governor Newsom. Is it okay? Because I think the average person probably would have just made the mental leap that it's not okay and maybe assumed it was illegal. And I think it's as eye-opening as anything to that we are reporting it is perfectly legal to take this money and nobody seems to mind. Sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And again, though, it's important because these state lawmakers are facing possibly a package of bills that could determine the future of PG&E. So it is a possible picture of impropriety that these state lawmakers are accepting money from PG&E and then will be soon possibly voting on PG&E's future. I mean, we want to make that connection clear.
And PG&E committed federal crimes. You talked to a former federal prosecutor who said that very thing to you yesterday. Yeah,
definitely. I talked with Bill Portanova, Sacramento attorney and former federal prosecutor, and I put to him what we've been talking about here, and he basically said it stinks of high heaven. I mean, sure, it may not be illegal, and it's not illegal to accept money from a convicted felon, but if there's pending legislation and you're accepting money from this convicted felon whose future is on the line, it doesn't look so good. It doesn't look so good.
And that's really how we got to this point, was looking into that crisis and how the lights are going to stay on for you. For the last 8 months, we've been digging into that question because the damage from these wildfires is so huge, the price tag, that it really cannot be paid like this year after year. And the state has hit this wall where no longer will utilities be able to get insurance because the most insurance money can buy is $1.5 billion. We're talking $30 billion, according to PG&E's own estimate of 2 years of wildfires sparked by their equipment. So that's well beyond the 1.5. No insurance company is going to write you a policy if they see that you're going well beyond the cap of that policy each and every year. It just isn't going to happen. So the state is thinking about stepping in to prop up these utilities so that they can be financially viable. And that's the pickle. To some extent, as long as PG&E holds the monopoly it does over a territory the size of Oklahoma, by the way, and 4 out of every 10 people who live in California, as long as that is true, what's good for PG&E on some basic level is going to be good for California, because nobody wants the lights to go off for 16 million people. Right? And that is the pickle we find ourselves in. The solutions are being crafted now, and they're being crafted by a body of people, elected lawmakers, 8 out of 10 of which took money from PG&E to help win office. As of this moment, I can tell you 1 gave back part of the money they got, 2 gave it all back. 1 did it after we asked, said he was sorry. That was Senator Anthony Portantino, of Glendale down in Southern California, who thanked us for bringing the issue to his attention, said he completely regrets and apologizes for the circumstances. He took his $4,000 of PG&E money that he got in a donation to his campaign, turned around and gave it to Butte County schools, some of which, by the way, burned down. I was watching them scrape up the ruins of schools in Paradise just weeks ago. So there's obviously a lot of recovery that needs to happen there. He said he felt better about giving the money to that cause than returning it to PG&E.
So let's pause and do a quick summary for folks who are just joining us here. Brandon Rittiman here, Becca Habegger. Brandon's been working on this long series looking at, all things PG&E, but what we're talking about specifically today is that there are 98 state lawmakers on both sides of the aisle who've accepted money from PG&E after PG&E's 2016 criminal felony conviction related to the San Bruno pipeline explosion in 2010. And so what you and your team did is you reached out to those 98 lawmakers, as you said, 8 out of every 10 state lawmakers, and you asked them, hey, is it, sure, it's legal. It is legally okay to accept campaign donations from a convicted felon, but is it morally right? Did you know at the time of accepting it that PG&E was a convicted felon? And then number 3, would you be willing to give back that money or donate it somewhere? So you reached out to those 98 lawmakers. Give us the numbers. How many did you hear from? How many did you not hear from?
I think we heard from 8, although Eric's sitting right over there and can correct me if I'm wrong. But we heard from several who said they'd get back to us.
Okay.
You want to hold up some fingers? No? He's thinking. It was somewhere on the order of a half dozen to 10 that got back to us and acknowledged the questions at all.
Yeah.
Many of them said they were going to get back to us and then never did by our deadline, which was midnight last night. And as of this moment, of the 98 who took any PG&E money at all, which was about, it was several $1,000s in most cases, 3 have given any money back. 2 of them gave all of the money back.
Sure.
So that's it right now.
And that
means the net result of all of that means at the beginning of this quest this week, as far as we knew, 82% of your lawmakers in California had taken PG&E money and are going to be voting on its future. And now we can tell you that is down to 80%.
80%, yeah.
Instead of 82.
And so what the former federal prosecutor I spoke with yesterday, Bill Portanova, said was this just is the perfect example of the appearance of impropriety. You had one state lawmaker write back to you, right, and say, yes, I accepted the money, and no, it is not influencing me, period.
Yeah,
Keeping the money.
I'm beyond influence.
Yeah.
Because I took an oath, was basically that answer.
Yeah.
Which
Side note, keeping the money, right?
Keeping the money.
Yeah.
As far as we know,
From
didn't say anything about giving it back.
Sure.
So that was one response that we got. You're right. But most of the people who at least acknowledged receiving the questions didn't even respond to answer them by the time. So, and this is happening as we speak, by the way. I mean, yes, it's a holiday this week, and that's all fine and well. We're right in the middle of the legislative session. This package in the legislature that's going to determine the future of PG&E is being worked on, crafted by these people, and will be voted on by these people, and then signed by Governor Gavin Newsom, who again took, between him and his PAC, $208,000 of PG&E money after the company was convicted of felonies for crimes connected to San Bruno, where 8 people died.
Yeah. Let's take a moment.
The facts that are true when you start digging into this story and the details of it are really just kind of staggering. And this was one that just was like, it's been sitting there. You know what I mean?
Right.
But nobody seems to have thought there was anything odd about it.
Yeah, and by the way,
I think the average person would.
Yeah, Brandon's been digging into this so long. This Firepower Money series is this great 3-part documentary series that is going to be released later this month here on ABC 10. It's
next Wednesday is our tentative. We're pretty darn sure.
July 10th, right?
Yeah, July 10th, and that is going to be on ABC10.com. And then YouTube as well. So you can share it far and wide with your friends. And really, one of the points I want to make about this is while we're talking about the politics in California, and pardon me, I'm just trying to share this video one more place.
Yeah, please.
Here we go. While this affects us, oh, look, I'm hearing us now. How about that? Won't you join us? I'm going to type. Oh,
yes.
Right.
Well, while you're doing that, I'm going to pause and just say, let's talk a little bit about, the real world impact that so many people face on a daily basis, because lots of people are angry about PG&E. Lots of people have legitimate questions about what is the state going to do to hold PG&E accountable, to make changes. You've heard all of the questions. But what I think the average person faces on a real daily basis is, gosh, high winds coming up in the forecast. It's a hot, red flag type conditions. PG&E is telling me that my power might be out from anywhere from several hours to 5 days,
Yeah, and there's a lot of misunderstandings about those shutoffs. So there was a shutoff program in place when the campfire started last year. In fact, when I was driving from this television station up to Paradise to be there for the first time and watch it all burn down around me, there were radio ads saying, hey, we're PG&E, we might be shutting your power off today. That didn't happen, and a lot of people were frustrated. Well, why didn't that happen?
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, and a lot of people maybe don't get this, is a shutoff wouldn't have stopped the campfire from starting. Period. And here's why. The power safety shutoff program that controls all of that didn't include transmission lines, those high tension power lines that span over long regions. The shutoff program was just to shut off distribution lines. And these are your neighborhood power lines, usually on wooden poles, the stuff you see out your backyard in most parts of California. Those were part of the program. The transmission lines, the big metal tower high tension lines, they weren't even on the radar screen. And they shouldn't have to be. That's the big thing. Those are supposed to be able to withstand high wind. They're taller than most of the trees. They're not that big of a concern in theory on windy days. In fact, if you talk to the people in the industry, the number one cause of fires from transmission lines is a bird hitting it and falling on fire to the ground. And you might get lucky and that doesn't happen on a windy day.
Sure. Yeah.
So they don't tend to start big fires. This isn't the kind of thing you would expect to happen, is what the CAL FIRE chief told me when I asked him about it. And the fact that PG&E this year has added those big high tension lines into the program, its critics would tell you is sort of a tell that they don't have great faith in the safety of those lines.
Sure.
And in fact, the one that started the campfire, which PG&E admits, has been shut down permanently. And it was where they found 15 to 20% of their problems, according to the guy running the inspection program who did a phone call with reporters the other day. He didn't take our questions, but he did a phone call with reporters the other day, and he said 15 to 20% of the problems that they found, and they found about 100 must-fix immediate problems, is what I'm talking about. 15 to 20% of those, they found them on the Caribou-Palermo line, which is the name of that high-tension power line near Paradise, and they've shut it down forever.
What was the problem? Why did that high power transmission line spark the campfire?
I wish I had a picture that I could flip up here, but if you look at a big high tension line, usually you'll see, you know, several lines parallel to each other that are running, right?
Yep.
This particular one had 3. So you had a center line and 2 on the outside. Every mile or so, they switch the order of what those lines are in so that way you don't have 3 miles of line all come down if there's a problem.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So what they do every mile or so is they have a tower that's a special tower, has jumper cables.
Yeah.
And they take the right-hand line and they switch it and make it the left-hand line. And they take the center line and they make it the right-hand line or whatever. So
That's common practice.
Jumper cables. Yeah, this is part of, it's a safety thing.
Sure.
So those jumper cables are what failed. There was a hook holding one of those. PG&E says it found a worn hook at the site.
Okay.
And what its critics and the lawyers suing it will say is, well, that didn't happen overnight. So how did you not know how many years it takes for that thing to fail and why it didn't get replaced in time? And we don't really have a sufficient answer to that, and we may not until this all ends up in court.
Sure.
But that is what failed. So what happens is this little jumper cable that's meant to switch the order of those lines swings down, makes contact with the metal tower, sparks molten metal fall onto the brush below. They had clear brush underneath those.
Yeah.
Didn't really look like a crazy overgrown forest there.
Yeah.
But the fire on a windy day with those big windy gusts, 50 mile an hour or whatever, blows them right up into the forest, goes to the top of the ridge. And this is the other thing people misunderstand about Paradise. It wasn't some big crown fire just racing towards town. It got to the crest, and then all of these big embers just started to fly in that high wind, and they can go a mile or more. So now you've got a miles wide column of fire hitting the crest of a hill and embers just raining down on every part of Paradise all at the same time.
Yeah.
And when I was there watching it all burn around me, you had people that were out of their minds frustrated. Where's CAL FIRE? Where are the firefighters? Where are they? The reality is there is no fire department on the planet that can deal with 18,000 structure fires at a time. Does not exist. Okay? So if we're faced with these perfect storm type of fires, we need to have plans that are adaptable enough that we can have more people survive next time. And Paradise's plans were good plans for that running crown fire type of fire, but they were not up to this task. They actively planned against abandoning ship, getting everyone out of town at once. They wanted to do it piece by piece to not clog the roads up. Smart for most fires. For this fire, completely inadequate. They didn't sound the biggest alarm bells that they had. They didn't use wireless alerts. So that is a part of this story that we are absolutely not going to lose sight of, and it's why we broke it down into 3 elements. Yes, the politics matter, and I think people do want accountability for PG&E. The people who lost their homes tell me they do, and they want things to change, and that's not going to happen unless the people in positions of authority actually take this issue seriously, right? And what our reporting has uncovered is that most of the decision makers in California are taking PG&E's money despite its federal convictions amid that climate. So I think that's important for people to know. But they also need to know what the solutions are, what the issues are, and what these fires are doing. And that's what firepower money is. When you watch these episodes next week, we are taking a comprehensive look at this wildfire and utility crisis crisis. It's really both. It's going to make the affordability crisis in California worse. Your insurance is going to go up wherever you live in California. It'll go up a little bit if you live in the city. It's going to go up a lot. And some people are even getting canceled up in the foothills and the forests.
Right.
So that's just one example. Electricity rates are going to go up too. And what can all be done about it? Unless we buy down that fire danger, this problem is not going to stop. That because the 150-year pile of fuel that we've been building in our forests isn't going away.
Yeah, when we first sat down to talk about it, you spelled it out so well. You said it's multi-pronged. I mean, anyone knows that there's no simple solution, or we would have found it by now. But it's PG&E's aging infrastructure, yes, and as is being alleged, neglect over the years to keep that up. It's also climate change, and it's also forest management and letting that dry brush. It's so many different things, and it's state lawmakers' decisions.
And that's the tough thing is politics can be so reductive. Look, I was a full-time politics reporter for the last 7 years. Politics gets so reductive. It's this or it's that. It's this or it's that. It's not. It's everything. Yep. And unless we take it seriously and all of us in California get a lot smarter about this, we're in for a lot worse time going forward. And I mean, I hope to goodness that the Paradise is the worst fire in California history forever, but I'm not convinced at this point that that's the case. And I'm not saying that every year you can expect to have that. But when it happens, we see what it looks like. Yeah. And can you imagine losing another town? You know what I mean? And that is why the federal judge who's in charge of PG&E's probation is making them shut the power off more.
Yep. So let's talk about that. So we said how last year there was a public safety power shutoff program, but it only impacted those distribution lines, those smaller lines on the wooden poles in your neighborhoods. What changed this year is that PG&E essentially expanded its public safety power shutoff plan to include those big transmission lines that you see out in the country stretching between counties and regions. And so because those are now part of the power shutoff program, when one up in fire danger, fire country is going to get shut off, that impacts miles and miles away.
Even down in the Central Valley, nowhere near a tree.
Yep, Manteca is a great example. I just attended a city council meeting there last month. It was the city council, a packed room of more than 100 people, and then one PG&E spokesperson. I would not want his job, especially on that day. I mean, there were people.
And then, was it the vice mayor who said they were pissed or whatever?
It was mayor. Yeah, Mayor Ben Can too. Yeah, he said, look, people are pissed. We're pissed. Because essentially, we are sitting here in non-fire danger country, relative to the rest of the state, in the Central Valley here, and yet we are facing power shutoffs. PG&E has told us, we, the city of Manteca, are facing possible power shutoffs of up to 5 days. And they said, it's at best inconvenient and expensive if you have a fridge full of food, or like a lot of people, if you're out hunting, you have your meat in the freezer, that you have hundreds of pounds of meat. That could go bad if you don't have a generator. And how much gas do you have for 5 days of generation, But then at the worst, it's a personal safety issue if someone uses electricity to power a medical device, but it's a public safety issue then if, let's say, the power's out for 5 days and they said, what if there are looters in the middle of the night because there's a curfew, and you can go as far as you want with the what ifs, but these Central Valley towns are facing days of power shutoffs because
average shutoff's 3 days, by the way.
3 days, and who can survive 3 days without power? And PG&E says, well, have a safety plan in place. Maybe there's somewhere else you can go, stay with family if you're lucky enough to have those resources elsewhere. But there's no guarantee that your family also won't be without power.
Right, and a long shutoff is going to be painful for the people who go through it. And what the federal judge who's putting the screws to him to make him do more of that is going to tell you is, I'm not letting this company burn down another town. And his words weren't really that different from that in court. I was sitting there. You're not allowed to film in federal courtrooms. We did ask. You're not allowed to, which is a shame, quite frankly, and a travesty. But that's a journalistic soapbox I'll get on another time.
I want to point out this comment, by the way, from Eva. Eva says, I would like to thank you, young man. Most folks had no idea these people were taking money.
Bless you for calling me young.
But she said a lot of these people didn't know that these lawmakers, these state lawmakers,
took the money.
Yeah,
and Mike Williams apparently just commented, asking how is it legal taking the money, and the answer is pretty simple, Mike. No law against it. And the people who write the laws, they're the ones taking the money. So, I guess they're the ones you want to be talking to, not me. We do have in a story later today, we're going to publish all 98 names. That's being worked on as we speak. So, set yourself a timer for a couple hours, come back to abc10.com look at that list. On there, you will find a tool, a link to help you look up your lawmakers. And if you want to write them, by all means, they deserve to hear from you. But that's the answer to that. On the shutoffs, I just wanted to bring up a pretty cool comment I got from a guy named Jeff Crane yesterday, day before. I posted a picture of the power line that failed and talked about all the change that the people who lost their homes wanted. And he said, thank you for a new perspective to the possible outages this summer. Those poor families wish it would have been done before the fire, and that he's humbled. So that's the thing, right? Nobody values their refrigerator full of stuff more than the lives of strangers. I don't think, if you really made them think about it, but there's pain to go around, right? Someone's going to suffer somehow. And so what's the lesser of suffering? And that's what the federal courts have basically weighed in and said, like, look, we're not going to lose another time. If we can, the judge said he wants to hold PG&E accountable to 0 fires in 2019. There's already been one in Monterey blamed on PG&E equipment this year. Didn't burn down towns. But
we have a comment from a Catherine who wants to know this is a great question. Who actually owns PG&E?
The shareholders. That is how that works. The shareholders, by the way, got several $1 billion in profits shared with them from the company in the form of dividends. The company has been banned from paying dividends because of its probation violation. The judge instituted a new condition of probation banning them from paying dividends until they meet the expectations he set in their fire safety plan. Basically what he did was the state lawmakers, in exchange for what a lot of critics called the bailout last year, made these power companies turn in safety plans. They're like, we're going to trim X number of trees and we're going to do this, that, and the other thing to make things safer, shutoffs, the like. The judge basically said, yeah, I don't think that's got enough teeth. I'm holding you to it. So he made that plan binding as a condition of PG&E's probation, and that is the thing that is triggering the further shutoffs. And where was I going with this?
So the dividends to shareholders.
Oh, the dividends, right. So the shareholders own PG&E.
But break it down. Shareholders. Who are the shareholders? What is shareholder?
Shareholders are sometimes you and me, and you don't even know it, because if you got a pension, your pension fund owns it, or your 401k. If you have a big index fund, it might own it. So, it literally is shares of stock. It's like you learned back in grade school. It's that is what it is. Those people own it, and you can try to make the company pass on costs to those people, but those people paid their money already. They bought the share of stock. There is a limit to how much the company can just absorb, and that's the troubling part. The people who regulate this industry will tell you it's important that they have that profit incentive, because otherwise, what is their motive to go out and build the new power line you need, or the new power plant that you need in order to have the lights come on in more communities? Now, the flip side of that is the state's given them a giant monopoly, right? It never expires. That's another thing I think a lot of people don't know.
The monopoly doesn't expire.
The monopoly never expires, and there's a reason for that, because long ago they did it that way in New York, where things expired, right? Well, what happens in year 5 of a 5-year contract? You're not building a new power plant, are you? Right? So the idea was, if they have the monopoly forever and they're always going to have the profits, then the shareholders will see the wisdom in making it safe and spending the money to expand and do the things that it needs to do in order to serve all the people of X state.
Sure.
And that theory has worked pretty well for a century. Nothing like PG&E has come along. Nothing quite like it. There's never been an entity of this size that has a monopoly turf of this scale that's ever had to be dismantled before. And the state is now openly contemplating doing that. Whether that's going to happen or not is a big open question. You don't see momentum for it right now. You can look at the campaign donations and draw your own conclusions about why there might not be political momentum for that. But the reality is there's a dollars and cents component to that too, which is PG&E thinks all the stuff it owns is worth $70 billion. And in order for us to take it from them as the taxpayers, we got to pay them for that. It's eminent domain. It's just like if they want to bulldoze your house to build a highway, right?
Sure, yeah. One more question, though, for you. One more question, because, we're going to wrap up here, but bringing it back to dollars and cents, PG&E is this monopoly. We're talking about dividends. We're talking about campaign contributions. PG&E is going through bankruptcy proceedings. So where is this money coming from?
For the bankruptcy?
Yeah, well, because some people are saying, hey, if they're going through bankruptcy, how do they have this money?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, so that, I think, is a common misconception about what bankruptcy is. Bankruptcy isn't triggered by you running out of money necessarily or not having enough in your bank account, right? PG&E went into bankruptcy proceedings because it declared it had an emergency in a sense, right? Sure. So they basically said, we're on the hook for $30 billion, bankruptcy court. Please let us file Chapter 11, and now they are. So that's what it is. We see this giant financial financial problem coming down the road. It's going to make us unable to pay all the bills that we owe. So let's come up with a plan now to pay for it. Sure. And, that may sound sensible or not to you. There are definitely critics who would say they didn't have to do this yet because they haven't gone through the process of settling lawsuits or finished a lawsuit from these fire victims that actually incurred them a $30 billion bill. They estimated it at $30 billion and said, we see this coming. We want to, game it out now. And it is sort of a pressure tactic, for lack of a better term, to force everyone who might be owed money by PG&E to a negotiating table to settle on a dollar amount, which is probably going to be a little bit less than it would have been if they hadn't done it. Yeah, well, thanks so much for your insight here. Check out our article. It's going to drop on abc10.com later today about the state lawmakers who have accepted campaign donations from the convicted felon in the San Bruno pipeline explosion, PG&E. And check out our Firepower Money series that Brandon has been working on. Make plans next week. 3 episodes. Each one's roughly a half hour. So, binge them if you want.
Yep. Thanks for joining us. Happy 4th of July.
Thanks.